The memory of the past must never be sacrificed at the altar of alleged progress. I also feel shame, I'm saying it now and I'm repeating it, sorrow and shame for the role that a number of Catholics, particularly those with educational responsibilities, have had in all these things that wounded you, in the abuses you suffered, and in the lack of respect shown for your identity, your culture, and even your spiritual values. All these things are contrary to the gospel of Jesus Christ. For the deplorable conduct of these members of the Catholic Church, I ask for God's forgiveness, and I want to say to you with all my heart, I am very sorry, and I join my brothers, the Canadian bishops, in asking your pardon. Clearly, the content of the faith cannot be transmitted in a way contrary to the faith itself.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the show. I'm Melissa Ridgen, and today we are putting reconciliation in Rome and that Pope's apology in focus. Whether you loved it, whether you hated it, Pope Francis did apologize for the horrors committed at residential schools and the legacy that those horrors continue to have on Indigenous people in Canada. Today we're talking to people with an array of perspective on that apology, how it helped some people heal while others say it's not enough, and also what should happen next. So, you know, APTN's Tina House, if you were watching APTN News last week, you'll know she was in Italy all week with that delegation of Indigenous leaders and residential school survivors. Here's her report from Vatican City right after that apology that we had just seen.
As over 200 delegates gathered at the Vatican for a final audience with the Holy See, emotions were high as they awaited to see if all the testimony from survivors and presentations from leaders made an impact on the Pope. Fred Kelly was the first to do a prayer.
Holy Father, may the Creator of the Great Spirit bless us today as we meet, that we can walk into the future aware that we must allow and follow the 7 laws of creation, and so that we can live not only in peace and harmony, but in the meantime that we can find that reconciliation and the healing.
And after the prayers were spoken, the Pope finally said the words many have been waiting for.
For the deplorable conduct of these members of the Catholic Church, I ask for God's forgiveness, and I want to say to you with all my heart, I am very sorry.
Since the late 1800s, residential schools were established in Canada. Over 150,000 Indigenous children were forcibly removed from their homes. Their parents faced jail time if they tried to stop the removal of their children, and oftentimes did not even know where they were. And meanwhile, many of those children suffered terrible abuses that left them scarred for life, and for others, they just never made it home. And here in Rome, the historic meetings between Pope Francis and the Indigenous delegation, the leadership here says this week has laid down a path to walk forward in reconciliation.
And so our message to the world is that we are all in this together. We're human beings. Let's work together to humanize the way we need to with Mother Earth.
For Métis National Council President Cassidy Caron, she says it was an emotional time listening to that long-awaited apology.
I truly felt the sincerity in Pope Francis's words. I felt that he truly translated the truths that we all shared this week from his head into his heart.
For the Tecamacalistic, that confirmed discovery of 215 hidden graves of children really intensified the urgency for the Catholic Church to admit wrongdoing and begin to make amends like what was done today. If those little ones were here today to hear that word sorry, what do you think that they would be feeling?
I think if those little ones were here today to hear those words that came from him, I think would be a step in that right direction. But I think that it's really important also for those parents. So to me, it's going to be something that's extremely important and gives hope to those little ones as well, to know that he is doing those right steps.
And over in St. Peter's Square, powwow dancers and singers performed in celebration of this new path that's been forged, one that holds promise for a new beginning and a chance at healing. And with that long-awaited apology here in Rome, Pope Francis has now promised to come to Canada in July to officially apologize to Indigenous people in Canada. Tina House, APTN National News, Rome.
Tina joins us now from our Vancouver bureau. Tina, thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. I mean, it's just been a whirlwind. The last week and a half it feels like a dream almost.
No kidding. For many reasons. For many reasons
yes.
for you. We're going to get to some of those in a bit. I wanted to ask you, well, first of all, the cape that you're wearing now, we saw that a couple times on APTN News. You were wearing that. It represents the 215 graves that were found at Kamloops, right?
Yes, this is by BC designer Yolanda Skelton, and I actually saw it on her social media feed before leaving for the trip, and I reached out to her and I said, Yolanda, I have to take that cape. I have to wear it in Rome because it truly represents, why we're all here right now. She said that when she made this cape, it was so incredibly special because she really wanted 215 little moccasins to fit on here, and exactly 215 did. So I wore it when I interviewed Cook B. Casimir over in Rome, and it's just very fitting for what we're talking about today. And I feel like I've been covering this now for the last couple of years very intently with many of my stories I've done in Kamloops, and we went over to Cowess's First Nation to cover the hidden graves that were found there. So I've been on this journey for a while now, and this whole Rome trip is just, it's been a really amazing experience.
No kidding. What were you thinking was going to happen? As you said, you've covered this story extensively leading up to this trip. As you're packing, you're getting ready to go, do you have expectations, or were you thinking certain things wouldn't happen? Like, what was going through your head at the time?
I honestly didn't know what would happen. I mean, when the 215, hidden graves were found in Kamloops, he came out and just publicly said that he was pained by the discovery, but he stopped short of actually apologizing then. So really, we did not expect the apology when it did come. But I do know that there were certainly incredible stories that were shared with him, all the leaders that came together. I mean, to see the three nations here in Canada literally join together like a fist and fight right to the end to get that apology, to get those words spoken to the residential school survivors and the intergenerational survivors. I mean, it was an incredible thing to witness. The Métis, the First Nations, and the Inuit all joined together to make that happen. And the elders that were there, I mean, God bless them. We had Angie Crier from Grand Prairie, Alberta. She's 85 years old. And what a dynamo she is. She said that, when she hugged the Pope, that for her it felt like a bit of a release, because as a residential school survivor herself, she was able to finally meet with the head of the church that had done this wrongdoing to her, and to hear those words, sorry. I mean, she broke down while she was hearing, his presentation, and she's just amazing, as well as all of the other residential school survivors that we met.
There was certainly a lot of emotion in your reporting. I can only imagine what it would be like on the ground to see people like that, have that be part of their journey. I'm wondering, at some point when you were there, were you thinking about the kids who never got to hear that apology, the survivors who didn't make it to this apology, kids who never came home from school? Did those things go through your mind while you were on the ground in Rome?
There's no question that it did. The first moment that we actually got there to Vatican City and we walked into St. Peter's Square, I actually went on my Facebook and did a live because I wanted to share that moment with everybody, to be able to walk into that holy place and just to be there and to feel all that energy there. I mean, it was incredible. I certainly felt my late father, Fred House, and my grandmother, Annie House. My grandmother co-founded the first political movement here in BC called Bakanzi back in 1969. My late dad took over as president when he was only 29 years old, and for the next 30 years he was a political leader for my people, the Métis. And you know, I just thought about them, and I thought about the fight that they fought for, you know, equal rights for Métis. And I was just so incredibly moved when the Métis were the first ones to go in and meet the Pope. And when they walked out of the meeting, the fiddle players were walking them through. They were jigging on their way, walking through the square. And I just felt so much pride and so much emotion as a Métis woman to see our people, our voices finally being heard and finally being recognized. And for an opportunity like this to be there, I mean, it was just amazing. And also, of course, the little ones, the ones that don't have a voice anymore. And that was one of the questions that I actually asked Cook B. Casper when I interviewed her, was if the little ones were here now, what do you think they would feel to hear the word sorry? And it just, so much emotion, you know, because like these stories take a life of their own. When you're actually in the field and you're interviewing all of these people and these survivors, honestly, as a journalist, it's like you take a little bit of piece of that with you. And when you're putting it on air, it's like you pay a piece of your soul every time you tell these stories. Well, I do anyway, I feel.
Absolutely.
And when we were on our way to Vatican Square, we knew everything was happening that day. And then when we arrived, and then when I heard that he actually apologized, my first personal thought, what I thought was, I just immediately felt the angels singing in heaven and the angels playing their harps and their trumpets, because it was a very powerful moment, and certainly a moment where finally those little ones' voices were being heard.
Oh. Well, as a Métis woman myself, I had so much admiration for how you told those stories. It was really right from the heart, and we felt that. And I do agree with you. You know, a lot of the stories that we tell, it is a piece of you that is part of those stories that get told. I want to play a clip of your interview with former TRC Commissioner Willie Littlechild. It was his birthday, the day of the apology. And I just want, I'm hoping that our audience had seen this. If not, they can watch it right here. Take a look.
Is this a moment for you to now truly start to heal from what happened to you?
Yes, it is. It's also, I think, very, very important to signal it as a start of reconciliation. Now that we know the truth of what happened, the truth is still unfolding, but it's also now time to turn to true reconciliation. And I think today, with that apology that we had, begins that journey to reconciliation together.
You know, was there anybody that you spoke with on the ground there who wasn't appreciative of the apology?
I don't think so. I mean, we were very much in tune with what was happening. All of us, even every one of the journalists that were there. I mean, everybody was deeply affected. I got to tell you that when the powwow singers first started singing in St. Peter's Square, everybody, their heads just turned. And for me, I mean, I almost felt like crying watching that, because I don't know if that's ever happened in history to hear those boys from Saskatchewan singing like they did. I mean, I was so proud of them and so proud of being Indigenous and so proud that Canada was representing on an international level. And it was incredible. I actually didn't hear anything from anybody that wasn't there for the common purpose of going there to educate the Catholic Church members, the Pope, the Cardinals, the bishops, the archbishops. Everybody was there for the common purpose of, let's start the healing now. And I think that that's what we saw that happened.
Well, speaking of proud, we need to talk about your win that came on the heels of you coming back from this trip. Your win for Best News Reporter at the Canadian Screen Awards. Just a huge honor, well deserved. You're the first Indigenous journalist to win this award. You are ours, so we feel that we've won with you, and just an immense pride. This was largely for the incredible coverage that you've been doing, like you said, over the past year at the graves, at Kamloops, at Cow Assist. Have you processed this all yet? Like this, what you just went through and what you've gone through for the past year, and then capped off by this honor?
Well, I'm starting to process, but it is a big one to take in. I mean, I just, that moment when I first actually heard that I was even nominated, I just felt immediately like I already won, because just to be recognized with the top in the business. I mean, Omer Sachedina with CTV National News, Mercedes Stevenson from Global, Ellen Morrow from CBC National. I mean, these are all like the bigwigs and the heavy hitters in our business, and to consider me one of the four. And then I actually threw myself a big party here in Vancouver. So I flew in Saturday night from Italy. I got in like 10. I'm on Rome time, so my sleep is all over the place. I slept a bit on Sunday. Monday, okay, get up, let's go party. So it was at 4 o'clock Vancouver time. My friend owns a bar downtown, so we actually just gathered in the bar. I had quite a few friends come, and that we just celebrated, and then the moment came when they actually announced my name as the winner, and it was quite funny because we had a bit of a 10-second delay before everybody else knew.
Yeah.
So I got like 10 seconds to do like a little speech, and then once it came on the TV that I won, everybody in the place went wild.
We went wild,
and then I literally broke down. I literally broke down. I actually ugly cried on TV, which I try not to ever do. But my mom was right beside me. I mean, all my closest friends were there. It was just so incredibly special, and I was just so honored, and I want to thank every single one of you at APTN that I work with, and I love you all, and I share this with all of you and all Indigenous journalists, because we've all won because of this. So that's how I feel.
We love you too, and we love Simone, who's behind the camera with you there right now. He's been on this journey with you this whole time. He went to Rome with you. Simone, huge shout out to you for the work that you did here too. Tina, thank you for joining us, and we can't wait to see what you have next up your sleeve to just keep rocking the Canadian media world here. Okay,
thank you so much, and have an awesome day. Thank you so much.
We are going to get into some other reaction in the next block. We're going to talk to a panel who weren't necessarily impressed with the apology, but before that, we want to hear from Truth and Reconciliation Commission Chair Murray Sinclair, who I spoke to just hours after the Pope said, "I'm sorry." Mr. Sinclair, thanks for joining us. How did you feel? What was going through your head when you heard those words from Pope Francis?
Well, I looked at them carefully to see how far they went. I think that was important for us to understand. And I was also conscious of assessing how soft they might be, because the sincerity is often reflected in the words and the way that they're expressed. I saw the video of the expression. It was all in Italian, of course, but at the same time, from the tone of the voice and the presence, I was thinking as I was listening that this is going to be so meaningful to survivors to hear this, to hear what the Pope is saying, and that the Pope is saying it, because survivors have been waiting a long time. There was a part of me that felt sad about the fact that there were so many survivors who testified before the commission and who've been waiting, but who are unable to wait because age caught up with them and have passed on. But I do know that they would have been glad to have heard this. And I was also happy for the Catholics out there, many of whom I've spoken to over the years in the various congregations that asked me to address them, who were weakened in their faith in the church by virtue of the fact that the church had not accepted responsibility, and now who I think will feel strengthened that they can be able to say that their church is doing the right thing.
Yeah. You know, what call to action in number 58 from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, it called for the Pope to come here and apologize on Canadian soil to Indigenous people. I think some people were saying that they were surprised that this happened at all. And as you said, many will probably be very thankful that it did happen. But does it also, do we have to come here now and do this, or are we good?
No, I think he does need to be here. I think survivors need to be able to share with him their feelings about hearing him say those words, and so I think it would be very important for him to come here, just as it was important for him to go to South America and say what he said to the South American Indigenous people. He could have issued a statement, as many people do, and left it at that. But I think the reality is that getting up and saying it in front of the people to whom it's intended to be given is very important. And so my hope is, in fact, that he might be given an opportunity to address numbers of survivors at more than one gathering, because it's going to be hard to get all the survivors into one gathering, but as many as we can hold while he's here, so that they can hear him say those words. I think would be very meaningful to them, very meaningful to their families, and also I think meaningful to all Canadians as well.
Well, we appreciate you taking time to reflect on this with us here today for our audience. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for picking up on this story as well as you have.
We need to take a quick break, but when we come back, we have a whole lot of you who were not impressed by that trip or the apology. Lots of very good points that we're going to get into right after the break. Let's go to social media now with our social media editor, Jesse Andrushko, to hear what you're saying about the Pope's apology.
Thanks to Melissa. We had hundreds of comments about the visit to Rome. There were a lot of negative viewpoints on the Pope's apology, but some people were more accepting. Let's take a look at some comments. First, from Michael on Facebook. Interesting. He apologized for the actions of some Canadian Catholic clergy, but not for the Vatican itself. It was the Roman Catholic Church that covered up these behaviors for over a century. Angela commented, I'm sorry, but I don't believe him. The Pope should have said something long ago. I don't like the fact that there was drumming and dancing at the time. From D, those who choose to heal, that's amazing and good for them. Those who choose to feed their anger by their negative comments, I'm so sorry for your hurting. Praying one day you see how forgiveness is part of that healing. He never hurt you, however someone did, and that's not right. Brenda said, with the wealth of the Catholic Church has accumulated, it seems appropriate to compensate these communities that were affected. I'm sure there's trauma that has been passed on to younger generations. Doc commented, so sad it took so long, however, he's not the guy who did all them harm. Just hope he rights all the wrongs. From Aaron, if the Pope apologizes, people will be angry. If the Pope doesn't apologize, people will be angry. There is no option that will give everyone what they want. Alice said, worst apology ever. It lacked sincerity, ownership, and the responsibility. Such an insult to those who have been affected by the violent ways of the Church's goal to assimilate the Indigenous. They deserved a much more sincere, genuine, compassionate apology. Lastly, from Lisa, just remember some people wanted and needed this. All these delegates would not have gone there if it didn't matter to them. For those that need an apology to begin healing, I hope this brings them some comfort and peace. Thank you everyone for sharing. For all our coverage on the trip to Rome, visit aptnnews.ca. If you want to share your opinion on the Pope's apology, here's how. Join our conversation now. Send your thoughts to infocus@aptn.ca, like us on Facebook on our APTN News page, and follow or tweet us at APTN in Focus.
As is obvious, some people were pleased with last week's events, many others were not. We love hearing all sides. And now, some of those who took to social media with why that visit and the Pope's words don't satisfy them. Joining us now, Rachel Ann Snow of the Stoney Nakoda Nation. She's an analyst, Indigenous legal scholar, and First Nations advocate. Russ Daibo of Kahnawake Mohawk Territory, well-known policy analyst, a historian, and an advocate. And Dan David of Kanesatake Mohawk Territory. He is an award-winning award-winning journalist and lovingly referred to here as the grandfather of APTN News. He was our first news director. Well, I guess in the words of the great Shania Twain, that don't impress me much kind of sums up what a lot of people feel about this trip, about that apology. I'll ask each of you, what didn't work for you? We'll start, Dan, you want to kick it off?
I think everybody already said in lots of interviews before that it wasn't really an apology for what the institution did. It was an expression of sorrow for the pain inflicted by individuals representing the Catholic Church. And so it kind of fell short. Most people felt.
Yeah. Russ, what didn't work for you?
Well, I guess I kind of see it two ways. I understand the residential school survivors who were impacted by attending those institutions. There's a healing aspect, and some have latched onto the words that the Pope said, I'm very sorry. But like Dan says, it was in a larger context of not apologizing for the role the church had. And that's where the issue of justice comes in. He didn't even mention the Doctrine of Discovery, repudiating that, because that's the source of the genocide and the theft of lands. That led to the residential school, assimilation process, the Indian Act and all the things that followed from the church doctrine. And so, of course, I personally, as a intergenerational residential school survivor, because my immediate family members, some of them did go to residential school, I can't accept those words from the Pope. I know people are waiting for him to say more about what he's going to do when he comes to Canada. But I think that's it, that what he said in Rome was very hollow.
Yeah. And I want to get back to the Doctrine of Discovery, the papal bulls. I know, last week people were frantically Googling what some of that even meant. Rachel, I want to ask you, though, you had made a comment kind of resounded with me about the gifts, that it's customary to give gifts on diplomatic meetings like this. Lots of people took gifts with them to give to the Pope and Catholic Church officials. You said, the Catholic Church has taken enough from Indigenous people. So the gift giving sort of didn't rub you the right way too. Can you share your thoughts with us on that?
Well, I think I actually had a lot of discussions on social media about the visit, and I want to just repeat some of the things that I heard from some of the people who were commenting, saying that some of our own Indigenous people don't have access to moccasins or some of the things that were given to the Pope. So that was a concern for a number of First Nation people, that these are gifts that even our own people can't access, or we have difficulty accessing. So why would we go and take those really time-honored, treasured gifts that carry such meaning to a place where we're trying to get acknowledgement for a wrong that has been historically going on since the first settler colonizers landed in North America. So I think that that resounded with me, because it is a practice of our people to be welcoming and to be giving. We have given the island, Turtle Island, the North American, the whole continent. I think that's enough. I don't think we have to go to the Pope anymore and give him anything, especially if there's conditions attached to these gifts. That's not even proper gift giving, I'd say then.
Yeah. Who would like to talk about the Cradle board?
Well, it came from an Oneida person, and she went to Rome with it. She presented it on behalf of the Haudenosaunee, but only as a loan. Apparently, she left it there overnight so that Pope could consider the children that the Cradle board represents, what happened to them during those residential school periods, and to reflect upon it and to think about it for the next day's apology or statement from the Pope on an apology. Yeah. And it was taken back the next day as well.
Does it sit well with you to think of something like that, like a cradle board, sitting in the Vatican with people who are part of something that's inflicted so much damage on our kids?
Personally, I think it's symbolic. I think that symbolism goes a long way towards striking a message. And it wasn't a message that was meant specifically for the Pope. I think it was meant for the Canadian public more than anybody else. That message, the cradle board presentation, leaving it there overnight, I think was meant not to change the Pope's mind, but to really get Canadians to reflect on it. Mm-hmm. So.
Russ, I want to go back to the mention of the Doctrine of Discovery and these papal bulls. Like, a lot of people were like, for one, I mean, I knew about the Doctrine of Discovery. I had never heard the term papal bull before, so I was one of those people that's maybe, living in the dark a bit, and I was Googling quickly last week. What is important about the Doctrine of Discovery being repealed, new papal bulls coming out to cancel out old ones? If you could just kind of summarize for people who might have been in the dark last week too.
Well, it goes back to a 1493 papal bull where the Pope issued a decree, basically, that, the European sovereigns can go and discover new lands that are inhabited by non-Christians and take those lands. And that's, in fact, what happened. The Spanish killed millions of indigenous peoples. The French came. The English, they were all competing for access to the so-called New World based on that doctrine. And in fact, the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples in 1996, the very first recommendation that they issued was that the governments and the courts need to stop relying on those racist doctrines to justify their theft of Indigenous lands, territories, and resources. I think it's really important. There's been debate. Legal experts have weighed in and said it wouldn't change the centuries of settler laws. But I think it's the foundation. If the Pope rescinds those papal bulls, particularly the 1493 one, he takes away the foundation or the root of the theft and dispossession. That the Western liberal democracies have used to justify stealing lands. It's an ethical and moral question, which will lead to, I think, taking away in Canada. Canada uses the term assumed crown sovereignty. Well, that's another way of saying Doctrine of Discovery. I think it will undermine the legitimacy of them being able to say they took the continent or Canada based on that doctrine.
Rachel, I'm curious if before the trip, like your thoughts of the trip, and I think a lot of people felt like this, seeing, why are our people going to a foreign land to ask for an apology or to try to convince this church that they need to act in some way? Why are we going there to do it? I'm curious if you feel the same after the trip, or if anything you saw during the trip makes you think differently about how you had thought about it previously. That's not the nicest way to phrase the question, but
actually, no. What I thought before the trip was, again, I think it's in bad form to go ask for an apology. If you have to ask for something, there's nothing authentic about that apology. And I think it was very scripted what the Pope read. I think the Pope, it really bothered me. I was speaking to another radio station, and the non-native person I spoke to said it really resounded with him, the words, because he really felt that it was a meaningful apology. And I said, I found, I was insulted because I found the Pope used analogy. Well, the writers for the Pope, I must say, used analogy and used some of the special words that we use as Indigenous people, are some of our worldviews and our thinking, and basically took those and put them into like a religious context that would justify his position. So I was offended. And no, I don't think, because when I initially read the apology, I understood quickly that it was not an apology on behalf of the Roman Catholic Church. It was an apology on behalf of the few that might have committed these atrocities.
Dan, you had mentioned that there have been apologies before, for slavery, for sins against Jews, women, sexual assaults, European Roma. When you look at those apologies and you compare it to the apology that came on Friday to Indigenous people here for the role of some in residential schools here, how did those apologies compare for you?
I think there's a common thread with the Roman Catholic Church that it issues a lot of apologies on behalf of crimes that were committed by some individuals. I mean, that's a running thread throughout. In Ireland, in Brazil, in Germany, in the Netherlands, it's always the same, that there are a few individuals who did wrong. But the church itself is covered up a lot of these things. That's the other thing that you find with the apologies, that in behind the apology, there's a lot of cover-up, a lot of shifting of people from here to there to avoid prosecution. And it spends a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of resources in order to preserve, what's the term? The brand of the Roman Catholic Church, to preserve its reputation, as opposed to actually coming forward and paying reparations or making an institutional obligation to make itself responsible for what the institution has done. And I think that's pretty much standard, as far as the Roman Catholic Church is concerned, throughout, the last 100 years or so.
Well, there's the $350,000 that was spent on this trip. We were saying that, it's a good investment in the PR of the Catholic Church brand. Russ, the Pope is supposed to be coming here this summer, probably. People are speculating, that he will come here, he will apologize. Should he come here, Russ? And if he does come here, what should he be doing while he's here?
Well, I think he has to come here. I mean, the whole climax of that week-long set of meetings was for him to make that statement and to give the indication he was going to come here and make some kind of statement in person. I don't call it an apology. I think it's a non-apology. There was a previous visit by the Pope before in the north with the Dene. The Pope, there have been papal visits here to Canada a few times. This time, though, from what I hear, there's a lot of demands being put that he needs to put an action plan. It's not enough just to say that he's sorry. He probably needs to expand to the role of the church. He's apologizing for the role of the church, because the church was acting basically as agents of the crown in operating those residential schools, because that was under the Indian Act. Those sections of the Indian Act. And really, there's some coordination between the federal government and the church on this, because if you go back to the Indian residential school settlement, which, Phil Fontaine negotiated as the former APTN National chief, the apology that Prime Minister Harper made was part of the residential school settlement agreement. And the Truth and Reconciliation was another component. So, this goes back, and that let the church off the hook in a lot of ways, the terms of reference for that Truth and Reconciliation Commission, because it didn't have the powers to subpoena anybody. It couldn't compel anybody to testify. It had to be voluntary. They couldn't mention anybody, priests or nuns or anybody, unless they'd been criminally charged. So that all affected, the calls to action, the results of that process. It was very limited in what it could do. I think the commissioners tried to push it as far as they could, but they had a limited mandate. And that really let the church off the hook in a lot of ways. And this is a continuation of that, the residential school settlement agreement, I think.
Yeah.
And so the role of the Canadian Council of Catholic Bishops has been throughout all of this, the reparations and the things that the church has to do. And the Canadian Council of Catholic Bishops did apologize or try to address the Doctrine of Discovery. But it's the Pope, as the head of the Catholic Church, that has to address this, not the Canadian Council of Catholic Bishops.
Yeah.
There's a lot of politics involved in this, and it involves the federal government, too, and their role. particularly with the identification of the mass graves, right? Yeah. That's what's driving a lot of this. The church is culpable, so is the government of Canada, and they're dancing around trying to deal with the survivors who are seeking healing, actions on healing, but also those of us who are calling for justice, because I think that's really what's needed here is justice.
Rachel, quickly, we're running out of time here, but I'll give you the last word. What needs to happen next?
Well, I just want to echo some of Russ's words that there was a court case where the Catholic Church were sort of exonerated. And I understand now, too, that Canada, there was an appeal in place, but when the Liberal government came in, they decided not to follow that appeal. They stopped it when Justin Trudeau came in. So that's information, again, where we need, as First Nation people, to remember, just as Russ and Dan have been saying, that it's not just the Catholic Church who is running these programs that hurt, harmed, and basically started the intergenerational trauma that exists today. But it was also the Canadian government. The Canadian government knew, or ought to have known, some of the alleged abuses that were happening. They had reports, they had the information. So from here, where it goes, I think it really has to be that we call out both the Catholic Church and the Canadian government in an action plan, that they come forward with something, because the Pope can say things, but can he actually do them besides, other than go through the church to institute some kind of practices or some kind of reparable actions? But the Canadian government is also culpable, as Russ said, in this. So I hope that there is a better action plan, that we see some heartfelt, not scripted, non-apology apologies, and that there's some definite healing plans put into place to assist our people at the grassroots level up, and that they have the opportunity to participate in this next visit.
Yeah. We are so thankful that the three of you could join us, kind of deconstruct that visit and that apology or non-apology, depending on how you view it. Marcy, Miigwech, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ishnish.
We need to take another break, but when we come back, we're going to hear from an outspoken Archbishop who's the first to apologize for his church on what the Catholic Church has to do next. Stay with us. The confirmation of graves at many former residential school sites last summer renewed criticism of the Catholic Church to do something, at the very least to apologize. Well, one of the very first high-ranking Catholics to speak was Archbishop Michael Miller. He offered a heartfelt apology. I got to speak to him last week right after the Pope said he's very sorry. Here's that interview. Archbishop, we're thankful that you could join us. You have been so heartfelt in what you expected from the church, what you wanted to see your church do, particularly after the confirmation of the graves outside of all of the residential schools last summer. I'm curious, when you heard the Pope's words on Friday, were you surprised? And what were you feeling exactly at the time?
I was a little surprised about the specific nature of the apology, that he said, "I am sorry." I thought that he might wait until he comes to Canada for that.
Yeah.
It was a wonderful speech, actually, as papal speeches go. It was beautifully crafted, and it was so heartfelt. I watched a little bit of it. I don't know whether it was live or nearly live. With the English translation, I wasn't sure what the Italian was like, whether how his voice went into the delivery.
Yeah.
But it was I found it very emotional, actually.
Well, and I guess I was thinking too about, Murray Sinclair had mentioned about the people who are Catholic and how their faith in their church, not their faith in God, but their faith in the church had been kind of shaken by how this hadn't been. So you're, as obviously a Catholic yourself, did this kind of shore up some of that, what you had previously felt for the church? Did you get some of that back? And keeping in mind, it's not just people like yourself. There are residential school survivors who are themselves still Catholic.
Catholic, yes, no, and I'm sure. I wouldn't I hesitate to speak for them, but certainly heard some of the commentary afterwards, and they found it very affirming and a further step to reconciliation, which was, I think, very, very helpful. It's a step. And there's going to be another step when the Pope comes to Canada, which he promised to do. The speech itself was very heartfelt. That the Pope had listened, and he listened for 4 hours to the groups. When the bishops of Western Canada went to see the Pope, we have to go every few years. We got 1 hour and 45 minutes.
Yeah.
So this was a sign that just how important it was to the Holy Father.
Well, I'm happy to hear that he did maybe give some of the time that the survivors and the delegates were owed, certainly because of the severity of what he needed to have been their ear for, right? I guess now my other question was, Truth and Reconciliation Commission, you had said earlier you were a little bit surprised that the apology came there as opposed to coming here. TRC, one of the calls to action was that he does come here.
On Canadian soil.
Right, on Canadian. Do you think is that going to happen when he comes here? Do you think he will come here? Do you think that's not going to happen now because the church
he already did it? No, I think he certainly hinted very heavily that he was coming to Canada. He even suggested, or he hinted at the time when he linked the importance of elders and the younger generation, of course, to Saint Anne, the grandmother of Jesus, and that feast day is at the end of July. I mean, he kind of hinted, and I'm sure that he will repeat or restate, maybe using other words, the apology on Canadian soil. I can't see any reason why he wouldn't want to do that. That it was important to the delegates and to the representatives that were there that there be an expression of contriteness and apology and sorrow. But it's also important that it be done in Canadian soil, and I'm sure that he will. He wouldn't come and not do that.
I love your hopefulness. So I want to ask.
I am hopeful.
Well, good. I want to ask too about the records. So, I mean, your church was one of the first to say, "Here, take our records. That's part of our reconciliation." We didn't hear anything about that during this trip. What do you expect is going to come of that?
Well, I hope. It seems to me that we've been talking about this not just in light of the thing that all available records will be all the records that are available will be made known appropriately, to those who ask for it. I mean, it's not just, there's certain archival things that have to be observed, but there's nobody wants to hold on to any records as if they're hiding something. That's exactly the wrong message. And of course, I know they asked for records in the Vatican. The Vatican wouldn't really have any records about a residential school in Canada. But religious communities have them, and sometimes they place them in public places, and then those archives have different rules and so on. But I think it's absolutely essential that we be transparent in whatever records we have that can be made available. Should be made available. Why hide anything?
Yeah. And my last question, this is something I'd never really heard bantered around a whole lot, but certainly during this trip, was about the Doctrine of Discovery. And that the Pope could have repealed this and didn't. And so there's some people saying, apology doesn't mean anything unless you repeal that. What do you make of this?
I think, the Doctrine of Discovery it's strange. It's a papal document that was really drawn up in the 15th century, fundamentally to arbitrate between the Spanish and the Portuguese on parts of the New World that they could discover. But within it, there have been interpretations and so on in which it seemed to legitimate colonization, not just fair settlement, but colonization. And that document has made its way into some common law, particularly in the United States, but also in Canada, and has been used, I think, unfairly in the past, particularly in working together on questions of land dispute. It would be helpful, and I think it is coming. Here's another hopeful sign, that there will be a document produced from Rome which would clearly repudiate the Doctrine of Discovery. In fact, de facto, it hasn't been acted on, and even centuries ago there was a pulling back from it, but kind of a clear expressed repudiation would be helpful. And I'll bet you, Melissa, that it's going to come.
You think that maybe he's saving that for his Canada trip?
He could be saving it for his Canada trip. He can't let everything out at once. But I think it's clear that the church doesn't stand by that 16th century document. But it had an influence, and so it should be kind of clearly rejected.
Clearly. Well, Archbishop, it is always a pleasure to speak with you. I'm thankful that you took time today to share your thoughts on this with us, and we look forward to. We'll talk to you again when the Pope's trip is coming up here.
It is. That'll be an exciting time.
Yeah.
Take care, Melissa.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
So there you go, some exclusive news right here on APTN in Focus that we can look forward to when the Pope comes, see if that actually happens, that repealing of the Doctrine of Discovery. We are all out of time for this week's show, unpacking that trip to Italy, the apology, and what should happen next. We are so thankful to all of you that you could join us. You can share this show or any of our shows as podcasts with friends, aptnnews.ca/podcast. I'm Melissa Ridgen. We'll see you back here next week.